mobilization towards our national cleanup. So thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, members, for your attention.
Thank you, Prime Minister. So the normal allocation for road patching that we would normally get, are we to understand that that's not going to be provided this time around, or that you're treating the payments? Yeah, however you feel comfortable. So is it that the payments that we receive for Melissa relief and for the emergency drain cleaning just before, and the housing allocation, is that kind of in lieu of the road patching resources that we would normally expect at this time to fix up roads? Many of us do that in January after the Christmas rush, because it's quite difficult to administer so many programs at the same time in December. But I'm wondering about that, because the roads, there's been a lot of rain, so the roads are in need of patching in the constituencies. So what is going to happen there? In terms of the national cleanup program, the role of the MPs will be what exactly in that? Because you've said that you're going to employ 100 to 200 per constituency in the areas where the cleanup is being done, which are the most badly affected areas. And the SDC is going to handle the engagement and training, you said, of those workers. So do the members of parliament have any role in that at all? And if so, what is that role? Those are my questions.
Thank you, Leader of the Opposition. Let me start with the role of the MPs. I want it to be clearly understood, Mr. Speaker, that the MPs are integral and critical to the relief and recovery process, and there is no attempt in any way to marginalize or to obviate the office of the Member of Parliament. And in every program that we have designed, the office of the Member of Parliament is integrated and connected and contacted. And I want that to be established for the records. We must, however, appreciate, Mr. Speaker, that unwittingly, or maybe by design, we are every day changing the role of the Member of Parliament. The Member of Parliament is becoming less of a legislator and more of a standing office for social work, contracting, construction management. Madam Speaker, this collective body has to be very careful as to how it expands its role beyond its constitutional jurisdiction. And I'm always very sensitive to it, in as much as I am a Member of Parliament, and I say to all, especially the new members of Parliament, I do understand how you feel when you get out into the field and your constituents say, I need help. And if you were to say to them that my role is to go to Parliament and talk, or my role is to go to Parliament or to write a letter to, they're not going to understand that. They're not going to see the value of that. What they want to see is for you to be present with them in the rain, in the storm, as you were when you were seeking their vote. It is the nature of politics. It's not just Jamaica, it's everywhere. But as leaders, we have to be careful how we succumb to certain pressures that change the nature of our government, including how it lessens accountability and transparency. So I'm very sensitive to that. Absolutely. So it's not my intention to use the disaster response to change the nature of the office and function of the Member of Parliament. And I will say this in response, Leader of the Opposition. When we gave, when we made the allocation of $10 million to MPs, there were certain arguments being put. $10 million, this can't do anything. $10 million, and we agree, $10 million is absolutely insignificant to the overall picture. But note what MPs have said. We need more money for transporting the $10 million worth of goods, not to take it out of the 10 million, but we put money on top of that for transportation. Then some members of parliament have said, we need funds to actually go and inspect the damage so that we can send back the picture. Then some members of parliament have said, you know, we need staff to manage all of this. In other words, I appreciate, and I'm not saying that I don't understand the demands. I too am a member of parliament. But the office was never designed in the first place to do this. And so either we are going to unwittingly allow it to happen, or if it is the collective mind that it be so, then we will have to sit down and properly provision the office of the Member of Parliament to become a department of the government that delivers service in the constituencies. So it is a reality. So I'm not meaning to open this as a debate, but I'm just pointing out. I'm just pointing out that these are things that, as the people who lead the country, we have to sometimes look above what the public is saying and what everybody else is saying and see what our collective action is doing. Are we leading or are we being led? Now, I mean, it is a debate to be had, leader, of the opposition. It's a debate to be had, but I wouldn't. For this cleanup program, yes, that's what I'm coming to. So in this cleanup program, as in any other, we expect that the Member of Parliament will play a critical role in, one, recommending the persons who will be employed. Absolutely important. So you will be working along with your SDC officers. Number two, that you will be playing a role in identifying equipment that can be used in the cleanup. The NSWMA will be the coordinating body for the trucks and the tractors and the excavators and the power saws and all of those things. So the NSWMA may not know all the equipment that exists within your constituency or in your community. So you will coordinate with them. But just to be clear, MPs are not to get involved in any contracting or procurement matters. I think I have to say this and say it publicly and say it repeatedly. It is not your role. MPs can play a pivotal role in mobilizing the community. Now, when any program is announced with resources, as MPs we know that the first thing that people see or ask is the money and how much you're going to get. But this is a national cleanup program where, though there is a component of pay, there is also a component of service. It is in all our interests to remove the debris from the communities. Let's be clear. There will be persons in communities who are not able themselves to remove the debris. Old persons, infirm persons. And therefore, as you organize the labor force, as members of parliament, you will have great knowledge of your communities as to where the help will be needed. So you can help to guide how the various work teams are directed, where they should go and how they should be deployed. So the members of parliament have a critical role to play, but I'm going to urge you to stay within the bounds of what you are constitutionally required to do. Now, the other question was the road patching. Mr. Speaker, we will not be able to do the road patching as we have done in the previous mitigation program because of one, the resource constraint, And number two, we would not want the NWA's resources to be tied up in treating with the procurement and contracting in other areas.
Questioning how it is determined that the hilly terrain of North Central St. Catherine and East Central St. Andrew could possibly get the same funding for bushing when this amount by NWA rates and standard would only do about 3 of my main thoroughfares. So I'm not picking on you, but my colleagues as well. Why would I get up in North Central St. Catherine, where the vegetation is so overgrown? I don't know how I could be compared to East Kingston and Port Royal. So I'm not picking on you. Benassi dog. I am batting for rural constituencies at this time. The bush are closing upon the cars. The people have nowhere to walk. Down in St. Andrew, is it northeast where Chuck is? Yes, northeast. I think maybe you would probably beautify the curb walls, yes. But we have bush, the vegetation that cars can't pass without crying up the side of the vehicles and with people not having anywhere to walk. There is no routine maintenance going on, so let's not fool ourselves. The bushing only takes place once per year. And when that happens, it is at a place where it is not manageable. We have to be using equipment to first clear the sides of the road before we can even send men out there to attempt to bush. Prime Minister, I'm appealing to you. Rural constituencies must be treated differently at this time to be able to take care of overgrown vegetation. My second question relates to the movement of funding. I think we have always been able to, based on what our needs are, that we might be able to do some juggling where possible. Please just elaborate.
Thank you.
Prime Minister, just a minute. Yeah, you go ahead now.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for those statements and the question. Because we had cut the program to dovetail it into the national cleanup program, we didn't make the usual parametric provisions where you could make certain changes. But as the program is defined now, I will inform my permanent secretary that I have no objections if a member of parliament were to decide to shift from bulky waste into bushing or from bushing into bulky waste. But there can be no compromise on the $2 million for cleaning drains and waterways, because if you note, it is more for vector control. So you can use this for vector control if you would like. But the threat now is mostly for standing water, where you are having rats and other vectors, mosquitoes. So if we would not allow you not to use that $2 million for that purpose, but you can move between bushing and bulky waste removal. On the matter of the rural constituency, it is a constant point being made in these debates, and more as it is made, I am inclined to consider it. Not as an additional allocation, but as we have, for example, which we debated last week or the week before, with the bauxite levy fund for constituency development. Constituencies, they get a special allocation from that. So there may be ways to craft programs that are specific to rural constituencies for which you would qualify as one, rather than to make a general allocation.
Member from St. Anne Southeastern, Mike.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Prime Minister. Just to echo, Southeast St. Anne is the largest, geographically, the largest constituency in the country. And so the issues related to, yeah man, that's true man, you check your thing. The issue of ensuring that we're able to service and deal with the issues with roads, bushing, etc. is critical, and I want to echo what the member has said. And thank you for your commitment to considering it. The other consideration which I would like to ask if you would make, Prime Minister, is some flexibility. You said there will be funds coming regarding patching, and so I wonder if you'd consider now allowing some of us to be able to access those patching resources earlier than others. And I say this because the roads in my constituency are downright dangerous, and they've been made more so by the hurricane and the waters from the hurricane. But in addition, we have some breakaways, which might be a separate issue, but certainly road-related, breakaways from slippages that need urgent attention. So, two parts to the question. The first is flexibility with the patching resources. Those of us who, in consultation with the NAA, can access and use those resources effectively in the short term, if we can have that flexibility. And secondly, the plans for dealing with the breakaways from the hurricane in constituencies like mine.
Thank you, member, and thank you again, Mr. Speaker. I see that the road patching and road maintenance are matters of concern, particularly for the MPs that are not within the 16. Let me assure the entire Parliament, the NAA presented to the Cabinet a budget for recovery of roads for $35 billion. We were not able to allocate $35 billion all at once. We settled on an allocation of $5 billion. That's what we could see our way to fiscally. And in that $5 billion would be allocations for patching up roads, minor and major repairs. I'm not sure if we did anything for
Prime Minister, please. It is now 7:20. House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, the time being 7:20, I ask that the House be allowed to sit beyond 7:30 to complete the business of the day.
The request is on the floor. Those in favor? Those against? Ayes have it. Prime Minister, you may continue.
Right, so we could see our way fiscally, and members, allow me to just engage you for a few minutes. Please bear in mind that revenues have fallen, expenditures by virtue of what we need for relief and recovery. You would have heard the Minister of Energy explain the demands on the government, even things that we did not budget for, we have to now put them in place. So it's a delicate balancing act to ensure that we don't end up in a financial crisis as we are responding. So every demand that is made, we put it through the lens of what is fiscally possible. Now, what is fiscally possible is also determined by how efficiently you spend the resources allocated. We can make allocations that are not efficiently used. So we have to look at what is the spending capacity of the entities that we are giving the resources to. So when it comes to road patching, for example, if we were to say, fix all the roads, say we're going to fix all the roads in all the constituencies, and then in addition to that, spend more resources on the 16, you know what the biggest problem was? the member, my sister from St. Andrews Southwest, who stood up in Parliament last year and complained that you have allocated, what was it, $40 million, but I can't get anything done. And why could you get that $40 million spent? Because it had to go through procurement and then contracting and all kind of long process, tying up the NWA staff. Note, we haven't made a budget to increase the staff of the NWA. We haven't taken on more people, it's the same staff. So even if we're making allocations, we also have to think about how the allocations are going to be spent. So these are just some of the considerations. So what we have done is to look at the entirety of the roads that need to be repaired, give priority to those that are in the worst damaged areas, which I think we all agree that that's the sacrifice we have to make. But at the same time, as soon as we have gotten those roads underway, then we can look at the others. So we're going to treat all the roads in Jamaica under the emergency procurement because they were all affected. But the emphasis, because of the resources that we have, will be on the roads that are in the most affected areas, and then we will come back and deal with the other roads. So we have allocated $1.5 billion for patching. Note that last year, when we were impacted by the heavy rains after Beryl, we allocated $2 billion for patching island-wide. So we have allocated $1.5 billion. Note as well that out of that $5, we have already spent, because we have cleared almost all the roads. There are only 15 roads that are still blocked. And of that 15, some are blocked because, as you mentioned, landslides and slippages and waterlogged, which we just wouldn't be able to address those. So we have already spent in clearing that. As I speak today, all the roads you can drive on. There might still be some bush on the side of the road, but that's what the National Cleanup Program is designed to do, and that's why we'll work in coordination with the NWA and the JPS and NWC to make sure that we're not interfering with the civil works and the road furniture and the critical works that are along those roads. And that's the coordination of the National Cleanup Program. So I put the MPs at ease. You will have your roads attended to, but from a procurement and contracting perspective, we want to get those 16 constituencies off very quickly, and then we'll be able to address the others shortly. So I would say that by late January, early February, we can start to patch, which would ordinarily be about when you would be able to spend that $10 million anyway. The overall coordination of the National Cleanup Program is the NSWMA. Yeah. Oh, the 10 million, right. So the usual. So the bulky waste is NSWMA. The cleanup and the management of the drain cleaning and so forth, vector control, that's NWA working with your Ministry of Health. So remember now, if you need to do vector control, contact your local Ministry of Health personnel to assist you either with baiting for rats or treating water or any of those activities that you would normally do in terms of ensuring that any standing water is not an environmental threat.
Member from St. Andrews Southwestern.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have 3 quick questions. The first one is really a very simple one. Prime Minister, you mentioned an allocation to councillors, which seemed a little bit minuscule. I suspect that they will be hearing more about a program for the councillors. That's one. It's 3. I don't know if you just want to take the 3. Okay. So just to make sure that as a former councillor, I'm not here and not paying attention to that. So that's one. The second one has to be, Prime Minister, you spoke about government having discussions with the SDC and so on, and giving instructions for the inclusion of the members of parliament and their role. The question, Minister, Prime Minister, is whether or not those recommendations are going to be in writing and clear, and whether or not that similar approach cannot be used for the distribution of relief as it relates wider than just this in this post-Melissa recovery and all of what we're doing. Because it isn't happening now. It isn't. That's two. Remember I said three? Right. So now, the third one, I mean, Prime Minister, is just very simply, I would imagine that government has been having discussions with external sources about debris management based on what you have said is the volume of debris that Melissa has left with us. Are you ready to update us, or are we to expect any more detailed update further on?
As it relates to the allocation for councillors, the revenue impact has also negatively affected local government revenues right across the island. So what we have done here is in consideration of the fallout generally for local government. I'll leave that burden on the Minister of Local Government when he comes to speak to see what other allocations he can make from his already dwindling resources. But if it can be topped up, I'm certain the Minister will do that. As it relates to the instructions, we will make the effort to put them in writing so that the officers are aware that the members of Parliament have been prescribed specific roles in supporting the National Cleanup Program. And then your third question is about debris management, right? So yes, we are actually in touch with other entities. And you would know that we have brought in, I asked the UN Secretary General for support in the management of disaster, the logistics of management, and he kindly sent a team in addition to sending a Jamaican, you might know him, Ronald Jackson, who is an international expert in this. And so this is part of the conversation going on about how to manage this debris. What we have done here is from our side, meaning from the executive side, is the financial allocation. And how can we multiply the allocation? So meaning that instead of just paying trucks to remove the garbage, how can we get the people who are removing the garbage understanding about debris, introduce recycling and separation and these other things. So whatever expenditure we're doing, yes, it's about relief from having the garbage, but it is also about making the community stronger. That yes, you see this garbage, but plastics can be recycled, metals can be reused, and we want to get that kind of notion into the community. But we also want to take advantage of this period to rebuild community spirit, to get people to come out and clean their own communities. So that's the idea behind the expenditure. So it's not merely an expenditure, it's about multiplying the value of what we get from the expenditure.
Member from Portland Eastern.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Prime Minister. Prime Minister, I just I crave your indulgence because I don't want to sound repetitive. I had a conversation with the Minister of Works, if I'm saying that, yes, in terms of preserving roads at this time. So if we don't have exceptions to the rules in everything that you've outlined, we may find ourselves in a situation where we're spending more to preserve roads that we just previously spent a lot of money to repave and construct. For instance, I can think of one road in Bellevue, that's in Fellowship, Portland. The top of it was done, millions of dollars spent, and the bottom of it. In the middle of it, there was no works done. So what you have is the road actually deteriorating, the unimproved area, going into the area that was improved and between the road and the drain. The conversation that I spoke about is the practicality of you would have to spend money to even dump the spaces so that it doesn't actually disintegrate further and start to destroy the other road, the new road. So my question then is, will there be an exception to the rules where it is identified? Because I know you outline the role of the MP, but if we are on the ground and we're seeing particular things to preserve the status quo while we await the parishes that are affected, we may find ourselves with a higher bill. And so before the next part of it is certainly the parishes that are situated similar to mine that I would have heard my friend speak about. The drain cleaning exercise is also one of road preservation. When the debushing part of it and the drain, you have drains, gutters that are like drains on those expensive roads. If they are not, if the debushing and the drain cleaning isn't working in tandem, what you're going to have is that the road itself is then destroyed. And so there are situations where, notwithstanding what's happening with NWA, and I heard it's practical, but the preservation is going to be almost as if we're going to find ourselves with a new problem and a more expensive bill. And so there was a complaint because in my constituency, I've had to take the decision to simply get marl and shingle, that I'm now learning that there's a different quality, and NWA is telling me you need to stop because the quality of the marl is not good. No, I'm just bringing that out to say that the practical solution, which rightly the minister would have advised me, is to, if you can stop the gap, you're going to have to do that. But how long can I afford to do that in a private capacity while we wait? And so I just needed to consider that.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just listening to the Member of Parliament, I can see his passion and the genuine desire of wanting to help. And just reflecting that when I became a Member of Parliament, I may have taken the same posture. But I'm sure that your senior colleagues over there, as I read their faces, would be saying, he will learn, he will learn, he will learn, he will learn. But remember, when we sit here and make the rules, we are not intent on breaking them. But when exceptional circumstances are brought to our attention, we will have to address them. The provisions made to members of Parliament, and let me say this, and I have to be the one to say it because you're going to face your constituents who will tell you, the Prime Minister allocate $5 million to you, to your constituency. Fix all the roads. The funds that are allocated to members of Parliament are not meant to replace the functioning ministries, departments, and agencies who have the budgets to actually deliver the service. The allocations that are given to members of Parliament are there for them to be able to respond to urgent, critical welfare and health and other critical social needs and some infrastructure needs. But the Member of Parliament is not the executive director of the NWA or the managing director of the NWA. He's not the supervisor of works. I have to say that and say it clearly. Now, I know some of us want to pretend as if we are, because that is the way you win votes. But it is setting you up because you will not be able to fulfill the demands. I need to just say it in your protection, member from East Portland, and for all MPs. So if you have said you have brought it to the attention of the minister. I just had a word with the minister. There is a process. These things, if you bring them to the attention of your NWA parish manager, or I suspect that road is a parish council road, that you bring it to the superintendent of works in the parish council. Those matters would then funnel up into the larger budget, and then the decisions are made as to how the larger budget is allocated to what is a priority. All right?
Member from Eastern St. Thomas Eastern.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Prime Minister, I heard you mention some special areas outside of the badly affected areas. I want to crave your indulgence this evening. There are two areas in Eastern St. Thomas. Bath, where the river, contrary to what persons are saying, that persons build their houses on the river banks. The road is the Copper Lane area where the river undermined the road. And it's in a very, very dangerous way. The last hurricane, the motor vehicles were washed away. Houses have been undermined. And persons are traumatized, because they have nowhere to live. They have to be here, there, and everywhere, living with family members. Some of them, the convenience is not proper. So I am asking for special consideration for the Bath Copper Lane area, where the river washed away vehicles and undermined the structure. Also, Rowlandsfield, where there is a breakaway in Rowlandsfield, very, very dangerous, Prime Minister. It happened from Beryl, and it has worsened since Hurricane Melissa. So those two areas I'm asking for special considerations.
Mike, Minister, Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm taking that this will be the last question so that we can wrap up. But you mentioned, member, special communities. We're going to be driven by the ADPEM data as to the areas that were affected. I suspect that Bath and the area that you have mentioned would be considered in the cleanup effort. But it seems to me that you're suggesting that it is more than just the cleanup that you need. I take note of that, and I will, through ADPEM and the Ministry of Labour and Social Security, ensure that the proper assessment is done, a report is given, and we see how best we can respond. Questions were raised about breakaways, and I didn't answer them. Now, just to be clear with the breakaways, the NWA is in the process of assessing the breakaways. I have seen that there are members of communities who are saying that they are taking matters into their own hands and trying to create pathways on unstable soil. I can only use this platform to advise members. I am the first one to encourage and support community initiative, but trying to construct a pathway on a landslide or a breakaway is very dangerous. The NWA, as I've said, they have done assessments, and there are two issues that we have to consider, which the public should understand. Once there is a breakaway, the alternative is to either bring the road inland, which would mean in some instances, or most instances, going through private property. We would have to acquire that. That takes some time. Or if we decide that it is feasible to restore the breakaway, which is usually a very expensive undertaking for civil engineering. So it is not something that I can tell you that it will be corrected overnight. So if there is obviously no alternatives, there's no alternate route, then we will have to move there very quickly to provide access, right? But if there is an alternative route, or an alternate route rather, I would encourage persons to use the alternate route rather than to risk going through the breakaway or the land slippage.
Member from West Central, St. James.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Prime Minister, are you aware that members of Parliament have experienced great difficulty in sourcing equipment in the immediate aftermath of the hurricane and are still experiencing that difficulty, and so it may impact that role of identifying equipment for the cleanup work? Firstly. Secondly, can we get an indication of what equipment has come in through international aid in the disaster response process? And thirdly, whether any mulching machine or other equipment that can assist with the biodegradable vegetation has come in or can be sourced to expedite the cleanup.
So I'm aware of the shortage of equipment. So if there is a general shortage, I'm certain that MPs are going to find it difficult. There is a notion that we have a lot of trucks, and as we pull from the regular trade, it is going to impact construction, agriculture, transportation. So we have to manage that very carefully. What we have done, we have made an allocation of $200 million to acquire equipment locally so far. I don't want to say too much about what we have started to procure, but we have started to look at tipper trucks, which are locally, which we can get out of the local supplier here, brand new, and chipping machines, wood chipping machines. We have started to look for those. There are not many in the local trade because you need the industrial heavy-duty types. We have asked our partners to supply excavators, heavy, what they call it, D9 bulldozers, compactors, water trucks, and we have sourced water trucks here locally as well. So yes, we are trying to source what we can here locally, and we have asked our international partners to also supply. What was the other question? I think that's it.
Mr. Speaker, we have another statement by the Prime Minister.
Prime Minister, Mike.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is my honor to report to this honorable House on my recent participation in the G20 summit held in Johannesburg, South Africa, hosted by President Cyril Ramaphosa of South Africa from the 22nd to the 23rd of November 2025. Over the course of the last few days, I held a series of high-level engagements with international institutions and world leaders with the overarching aim of securing Jamaica's interests in three key areas: advancing the country's recovery and reconstruction agenda following recent disaster events, mobilizing development and climate resilience financing, and reinforcing Jamaica's engagement with global governance institutions and the Global South. In support of this agenda, I met with the Managing Director of the International Monetary Fund and the President of the World Bank, sharing Jamaica's latest damage and loss assessments and presenting the recovery and reconstruction plan to the global finance community. During the Johannesburg meeting, I held productive talks with the following leaders, among others, President Cyril Ramaphosa, the summit host, and he affirmed support for Jamaica through their own disaster fund. I met with President Emmanuel Macron of France, in which we discussed deepening our cooperation and support for Jamaica's financing bid. I met with President Lula da Silva of Brazil, where we discussed possible agricultural support and support for Jamaica's relief and recovery initiatives. I met with Prime Minister Mark Carney of Canada, and I want to say here that Canada, through Prime Minister Carney, has taken a special interest in the financing of the reconstruction. It is a very technical area and an area in which we will require the support of many leaders who sit on the boards of the various international financial institutions where they have representatives on these boards. So when you present your package, you want to have global support from international leaders so that your request, your package of support can be approved by the boards of these international financial institutions. So that was the general thrust of meeting with the world leaders, to garner support for Jamaica's bid for financing. I met with Prime Minister Narendra Modi of India, noting our cultural and historical ties, and we also discussed support for Jamaica's agricultural sector and fisheries sector. And of course, all of these countries that we have discussed all assisted immediately as the hurricane struck. So we also expressed our thanks and gratitude to them. I met with the Vice President of Nigeria, and Nigeria committed to assist in our relief and recovery effort. And as I said, I met with Ajay Banga, and Ajay Banga is the president of the World Bank, and Kristalina Georgieva of the IMF. Interestingly as well, I had a good meeting with Tedros Ghebreyesus, the Director General of the World Health Organization. We discussed the public health situation in Jamaica as a result of the pandemic, and they have agreed to mobilize emergency resources for Jamaica. I also participated in multilateral sessions of the G20 summit, which was focused on disaster risk financing, climate transition, and debt sustainability, key areas for our CARICOM region. Notably, the summit's declaration emphasized disaster resilience, strengthening the international coordination for response to climate-related and natural disasters. Mr. Speaker, in those arrangements, I reiterated Jamaica's strong position. In those engagements, I reiterated Jamaica's strong position. We have already mobilized approximately $650 million US dollars, that's about 100 billion Jamaican dollars, for immediate available resources via our pre-planned and pre-arranged disaster risk financing framework. At the same time, we have access to more than $500 million through the rapid financing facility of the IMF. But I emphasize that our multi-year reconstruction effort will require substantially more support than these amounts alone can deliver. As I said earlier, the loss is estimated at $8.8 billion. However, a portion of that would be private losses covered by insurance. It is estimated, therefore, that there should still be a gap inclusive Jamaica.
Prime Minister, thank you for the statement. I have a couple of. In relation to the $650 million that has already been mobilized from the insurances and other sources, could you give me a breakdown of that $650 million? I know CRIF is about 90, the CAT bond about 150. What I'd like to know whether the balance of that money reflects insurances or whether those reflect any loans that we have taken from any other multilateral partners. I know the $500 million you refer to is an IMF drawdown, which comes from the Rapid Financing Facility. With the 1.15 that we have in hand, could you indicate how much of that we have spent in the recovery effort so far, and what are some of the immediate priorities? For example, we know many people have lost livelihoods in the tourism industry. We know SMEs have been decimated. What is the plan to provide immediate relief to those particular stakeholders where if you don't provide the relief now, the problem is going to be a bigger problem 6 months, 9 months, 12 months down the road? Secondly, and your colleague may be able to answer this better, are we receiving the full 150 million from the cap bond, or are there any fees or charges related to it, which would maybe 10%? I don't know what the figure is, but are there monies deducted from that to give a net value to the Jamaican people? And then I take note of the plan, and I don't think anybody on this side would have any criticism of your trip to South Africa to lobby for funding, and I don't think anybody said that. But from the preliminary discussions that you would have had with your multilateral partners, have you any indication at this stage, accepting that you wouldn't have something firm, of commitments that would help to close that gap of approximately $4 billion? And then for the Minister of Finance, what would be your projection? You're not the minister, but we haven't gotten a statement from her. We know we're at about 62% GDP. We had to expect to get down to 60 before the end of the fiscal year. You're obviously going to have to borrow. What is your projection in the short term in terms of what you anticipate our debt to GDP will rise to in the short term, and then over time, what you think, what level we would be at? And finally, you had indicated a couple of weeks ago, we're going to relax the fiscal rules, which nobody would have an argument with. Have we begun or started that process, formally submitting the report to the Independent Fiscal Commission, etc., so that process is underway? And we have formally made the overtures to the respective multilateral agencies in relation to seeking funding?
Member from St. Andrew Southeast, you mentioned in your presentation a new creature in our our fiscal landscape called the Fiscal Commissioner. And the Fiscal Commissioner examines all our statements and everything that the government puts forward for its credibility and whether or not it is sound. And they will make pronouncements. So we on this side have enforced a particular discipline. And that is when it comes to speaking on some of these fiscal issues, we allow the Minister of Finance to speak first. The Minister of Finance will come to Parliament Tuesday next week with some of the things that you have just asked. For example, you have asked about whether or not we have started the process to change the fiscal rules. Yes, it has begun, and the Minister will come with the necessary legislative changes that are necessary. And that process of bringing our supplementary and having it reviewed by the Fiscal Commissioner, that is underway. So a supplementary will come next week. So I don't want to answer questions that ought rightfully to be presented by the Minister of Finance at that time. I would say to you, though, that you have asked questions regarding, you've asked a question regarding what we have gotten in terms of the catastrophe bond and these things. The catastrophe bond, I understand that it's a full payment, but there are usually some small fees and so attached. What that is, I couldn't say. I don't know now, but the Minister of Finance, I will have her undertake to present that when she presents next week. Our fiscal resilience plan starts with savings, which we put into our National Disaster Risk Fund, then contingencies, which we set aside from each budget, then insurance for example, the CRIF, then our catastrophe bond, which we have gotten a full payout from, and from the CRIF, Minister, you remind me what we got from the CRIF? About 91 billion. And then we have access to prearranged financing, essentially prearranged debt that we can get at concessionary rates. And that would come from our partners, the IMF, the World Bank, and the IDB. From the IDB, there are some prearranged funds that can go up to as much as about 450 million, 400 million, thereabout. We will not be able to get all of it because some of it is reliant on some triggers being met. Those triggers have not been met in this disaster. The CAF, which is the Central American Development Bank, they have given us a grant, but they have said that they would be prepared to give us financing as well. So my visit to the G20 to meet with all of these leaders,